That's why we went into Somalia, because Ethiopia is next door to Somalia. For all you folks who don't know this,
Thanks to brothers and sisters for continuing to rock with us on the upper room of Zion. Indeed, this is Lidj, Yefdeyah, rastafari, Renaissance.com. And continuing with our podcast here for this evening, our brothers and sisters, just a quick shout out for ones and ones, of course, to check out Where is Jerusalem? The City of David documentary by Stephen Graham. We had alluded to this particular documentary some time ago when it was still in production. It seems that now the brother Stephen Graham, who was director of this particular documentary, has come forward to present it in the fullness, and ones can indeed check it out. It is indeed produced by the EP channel. Those ones can research that, look at it in your Google search or search it out on the YouTube. The full documentary is up for viewing, so be sure to check that out and support the brother. Of course, there will be many cameos there from many of the members of Brother Ben-Ami Ben Yisrael, rest in peace, of course, rest in child power. His community, many of the brothers, of course, who had trotted with him there in Des Moines, Israel, and of course explaining much of not only the historical truths, but the generational, linguistical, and also cultural truths of what is going on there in that particular region of the world, even though we have going on, and explaining much of the current events that are going on and being pushed out within the mass media. One can get a on-the-ground survey of that. So again, that documentary, Where is Jerusalem? The City of David documentary by Stephen Graham, produced by the EP channel, should be up in its fullness on YouTube or very easily accessible on any Google search or any a search engine that you prefer at this particular time. Be sure to check that out. Send a brother a shout out and a big up for producing that particular documentary. Much needed in this time. But continuing with our, of course, final two presentations here, brothers and sisters, to keep one's dates and many of the events that are taking place at this particular moment. We definitely had not sought to leave this podcast without alerting ones about what that comes out of the news from Judaland, as we know it, or Ethiopia. We actually had received this from one of the Ethiopian blogs that we usually check out, which is the TEO, or the Ethiopian Observatory, and the proprietor, the big of course, they should know by now. There's so many comments there on that particular podcast, so I don't know them personally, but I am definitely thankful for all of the important information that continues to come out of that particular blog, along with many others as well. But I first saw this particular story here, and many others have caught wind of it as well, speaking of BBC, the New York Times, NBC News, CBS, Al Jazeera, in which we will, of course, get into the Al Jazeera report as this is a little more in-depth and gave a little more context to what was actually being presented here. But the title reads as such: from January 3rd, 2018, Ethiopia to pardon political prisoners. Very interesting, just to say the least, as ones, of course, know if they haven't visited rastafari, Renaissance.com. We indeed definitely show our support for many ones, especially the Zone 9 bloggers. And we definitely send out our prayers for the family of Iskender Nega, who has been imprisoned for, I think, up to maybe the past 5 to 6 or 7 years or so now, for much of his political commentary on the modern Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. And even so, just with this particular subject that has come out, we are still, as Rastafari, awaiting what was indeed sent out in the mass media as the recognition of the repatriated Rastafari, though we have been checking, of course, with our own constituency and our fellowship there on the ground there in Ethiopia, and no such movement as of yet that really have come out, nothing significant, though there have been very small talks here or there from what we were able to gather from our ones and ones, of course, who have repatriated. But even so, we have to even take this particular subject in the same light as such, and of course, wait to show and prove to see what actually may come of this. But yet and still from Al Jazeera News here, Ethiopia to pardon political prisoners. January 3rd, 2018, and it reads as such: Ethiopia has announced plans to release political prisoners and shut infamous prisons in the capital, Addis Ababa. In a surprise move, the government says it aims to foster national reconciliation. The office of the Ethiopian Prime Minister said charges would be dropped against politicians currently being prosecuted, while political prisoners who are imprisoned will receive pardons, the Addis Standard magazine reported. Quote, politicians currently under prosecution and those previously sentenced will either have their cases annulled or be pardoned, unquote. AFP News Agency quoted Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn as saying on Wednesday. Desalegn made the announcement alongside other leaders in the EPRDF, or the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, the country's ruling political coalition. The government also announced it would close the Maya Kalawi detention facility in Addis Ababa, which has been described as one of the country's most notorious police stations. Police investigators at Maya Kalawi use coercive methods on detainees, accounting to torture and other ill treatment to extract confession statements and other information from detainees, Human Rights Watch has reported. The government plans to turn Maya Kalawi into a modern museum. Interesting. The decision was taken to create the space for a national dialogue and national consensus, according to the magazine. The government did not specify which political prisoners or how many would be released and when. Very good note. Tens of thousands. Awol Alo, a lecturer at Kiel University's School of Law and an expert on Ethiopia, said the most important question will be how the Ethiopian government defines political prisoners. There is a range of people who were arrested, accused, and tried and convicted of what we may call political crimes, Alo told Al Jazeera News, including endangering national security or the Constitution or terrorism-related crimes. Under that definition, Alo said tens of thousands of people could end up being released. Ethiopia has been using the judicial system to lock people behind bars, he said. The government has always used courts for political purposes. When it comes to high-profile politicians, the government accuses them of all kinds of crimes, sometimes corruption, more recently terrorism, to eliminate those individuals from the political space. Amnesty International says Ethiopia has engaged in a crackdown on the political opposition that saw mass arbitrary arrests, torture and other ill treatment, unfair trials, and violations of the rights to freedom of expression and association. Many of the recent arrests come in the context of widespread protests since late 2015 by the country's Oromo people, who number approximately 35 million and constitute Ethiopia's largest ethnic group. Hundreds of people were killed after Ethiopian security forces cracked down on protesters. After the government declared a state of emergency in the Oromia region, more than 11,000 people were arrested and detained without access to a lawyer, Amnesty said. According to LOJS, a combination of changes within the government coalition and public protests led to Wednesday's announcement. It is that changing dynamics within the ruling party itself and the protests taking place outside that have really brought the government to its knees, forcing them to make this gesture, he said. However, Adama Gaye, a Senegalese journalist and commentator who frequently visits Ethiopia, told Al Jazeera the move should be viewed as something that will be a revolutionary transformation of the country. With its economy experiencing double-digit economic growth, Ethiopia cannot continue being a closed door to the rest of the world, especially if the nation is to see continued foreign investment, said Gaye. In the short term, I don't think they'll allow any kind of democratic transition to happen unless the current opposition and international community push for it, he added. Very, very, very interesting, just to say the least, our brothers and sisters. That was actually my first full reading of this article, but just to say the least, we definitely had to make sure that we brought this to the eye's attention. As, of course, we mentioned many of the protests when they, of course, initially first began to happen within the Amhara and Oromo protests. Much of the solidarity is usually found in the diaspora of the world, so outside of the country of Ethiopia. And just to say the least, and put this on the forefront for many ones, especially, good brothers like my brother, my brother Amir, of course, who has been to Ethiopia a couple of times as of yet now. I myself, of course, who will be planning to visit again very soon, of course, to get a little bit more information, especially on our repatriated Rastafari brother and sister. But to leave that on the forefront, it's a very, very dubious situation when one deals with Ethiopia and Eritrea alike, just to say the least. Because what you usually find within the country is slightly different, and it's not always readily recognizable in the diaspora. It really is something that is hard to explain. But, of course, for brothers like our brother Amir, our brother Iyah, Sister Tehissina, many other ones who kind of know what I'm alluding to at this particular moment. They really get what I'm saying, even though it's, very difficult for me to articulate it in a way that will be understood for the ones who haven't had that experience. I also, send a big shout out to Sister Melissa, also Sister Melissa, who is still traversing in Africa as we know it. I think that she is indeed still in Senegal. Just to mention that Sister, of course, had spent a great deal of time and also had come forward to the podcast also here some time ago within the past couple of years to sharing her experiences. We were, very grateful for that sister to come forward and also, give her take on what presently had been going on in Ethiopia as far as she could see. And much of this, just to say the least within this article itself, has brought about much contemplation for myself, especially as for actually seeing the land and seeing how much development has come into play. And I definitely had those first thoughts of seeing much of how the present government had been doing things from such a time. And, as the article mentions, it definitely will play a great role in how much of the business will be conducted, how much of the policy will continue to come forth moving forward, especially with ones like China giving heavy investment not only in Ethiopia but in many other countries around the continent, just to say the least. Russia playing a part, not only militarily but also geopolitically as well and socioeconomically. India, of course. I mean, again, just speaking of the Shanghai Cooperative, the Belt and Road Initiative, these topics which we've gone on in depth to speak about, Ethiopia, of course, sits in, again, a very strategic position, as we mentioned before, with many other countries as well, door of the northeastern part of the continent of Africa. It really fits that a place where many ones from the east are looking also to do a lot of business there and fill the void of much of what the West has not been able to do so in the past years on up to centuries. So, again, it is a very strategic move. It's a very political move, just to say the least, if to hear certain things like this come out of many of the news outlets, not so much mass media, but definitely major players within the multimedia world. But even so, I'm still even contemplating this, so to speak, at this very moment. And definitely looking forward to having more reasoning with our brother Rasta. Since the brother is sitting at our messages here just speaking on this particular subject, but we definitely will get into more of that as our time moves on, as many other ones, of course, as I mentioned, within our own constituency, within our own fellowship, have gone to Ethiopia and are preparing to go as well. I myself included in that number, so definitely the time has come to its head. But just to leave it on the forefront for ones to research for themselves also, and definitely check out much more of the recent history just within the past couple of years. We even spoke on that the state of emergency. The brother Jan, of course, did the video there on Rastafari Tabasco of the state of emergency and how politically and socially that, of course, played its role in, or at least tried to play its role in, definitely putting the video back over Ethiopia and Africa, the continent as a whole, as to, I guess, insinuate extremely much more dangerous than many other places in the world to be at a particular time, though ones and ones may, have a certain, or had certain plans to visit certain places on the continent or, around the continent, so to speak. But, again, it just brings the prophetic word to the forefront, brings the prophetic word to fruition. And, again, biblically speaking, much of, what we intend to see as our hope and expectation. But knowing that faith without works is indeed dead, we have to, again, keep working for the greater glory of the kingdom and press forward ever. But give thanks, our brothers and sisters, for the patience on, our little tidbit on that particular subject. Definitely will revisit that at the earliest convenience, so to speak. But as we, of course, leave this also on the table for once, before we get into our last presentation here for this evening, we have not confirmed, and we are looking to get into what is known at I guess you could say, flash news or updated news or, breaking news, or as they would say in the mass media. But we're still researching to see if it is indeed true that UN troops have been deployed to Chicago. We have no references. We have no certification or no confirmation in that sense as to say yay or nay within that particular instance. Though we do have ones and ones that we have reached out to and intend to reach out to from the Chicago area and in the Chicago area as per this very moment. Many rumors, of course, have been going to and fro as the present administration had alluded that they would insist on doing such a move, but we hadn't actually heard anything as of yet, though many rumors have spurred up many ones, within social media, as well as many rumors just in talk on a day-to-day out here traversing through the world. But we indeed are looking to confirm that particular story, whether it is true or a farce. But still to come, and ones we put that on the table for them to do their research if they are able and willing also. But leaving that just to revisit at another time and space within the time that we have, our brothers and sisters. But of course, our initial and final presentation that we have here is one of high interest, we would say, high priority, I would say, for Rastafari especially, because I would even say, just want to note that this particular presentation really almost ticked me off, just to be frank, in a certain sense. And why did it? Because it, number one, followed the news that came out of Ethiopia, and number two, definitely dealt with much of what Rastafari had been telling this world since its inception. And what I'm speaking about is the quote-unquote legalization of marijuana in this particular country. But not only this particular country, Canada itself also to our near north. And if ones and ones really had known, I really was ready to prepare a recording about speaking on this particular subject, but I really more so decided against that and really sought to come to the eye live and direct on this particular subject. Why? Because as of January 1st, 2018, if ones don't know, in certain states, though many ones would love to coin it as just in the state of California, legalization of quote-unquote recreational use of marijuana has gone live. And not only in California, as though ones, of course, probably have heard from such a time, but especially up to this present day. In Washington, the state of Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Alaska, Maine, Massachusetts, Colorado, and of course California, as we mentioned, the legalization of marijuana had been in the forefront and been looking to be passed ever since November 2016. But it officially went extremely, on all fronts, live January 1st, 2018. And here we'll get into an article, but just a tidbit of what we had sought to present here for ones and ones, for them to, of course, research on their own. I know many ones were working, especially out in the western regions in California, New Mexico, our other brothers from Rastafari South, especially big up brother Rasta. We definitely have to get back in contact with that, our brother, and again, expound on certain things, especially the works that he was intended to bring forward with when Iyah, of course, could not attend the fullness of the podcast here, but just sending a shout out to, my good brother as well. Again, just much more reasons to get into on that particular subject. As we mentioned, just on the forefront again, January 1st, 2018, marijuana fully legalized in the state of California, along with many adjacent states and those vying for that particular policy as of the 1st of this month and this year, as we know it. And it was so interesting, just to say the least, that bringing this up, mainly because just a year, just 2 years ago, or 3 or 4, how many years ago, many ones were being criminalized, imprisoned, under the threat, coerce, and so many other similar words to this particular subject matter were being arrested, put into prisons, at the loss of their financials, at the loss of their, even some to the threat of their lives, especially within the Caribbean up until this point. Just so many things we could really speak on, but really trying to stick to the point just before we get into the article and the reading here, just before coming to the culmination of this particular URZ. We just saw so much of the criminalization, especially of the black and brown sheep within this particular a few generations, especially coming from out of the Rastafari movement there in the Caribbean, and those ones leading up until this point. And again, a big shout out to Yefdeyah McIntosh, the daughter of Peter McIntosh. And again, we are still showing our support and need to get a little more involved as a group, especially in Rastafari internationally on that front, for the well-being of Jawada McIntosh, who was also at this same point in time, even though we are here in January 4th, as of January 1st, 2018, marijuana is legal in many places here in the States. As Jawada McIntosh, of course, had the situation and the dealing with authorities there in New Jersey, and is still, to the best of our knowledge, from Sister Yefdeyah McIntosh, still in intensive care and still recovering from his situation there in New Jersey. But, again, just really trying to contain our emotions, contain our thoughts, and really stay on topic within this particular subject matter, mainly because we see that much of this is coming out of big business. This is coming out of, much of the coercive works of many plutarchs and aristocrats and those seeking to cash in on what we know as the healing of the nation, and even so just bringing that into the forefront. Ones even so have to do a little more research on that, seeing as how this particular item has shown itself to show and prove that it is indeed as such as the Rastafari elders have said from the Proverbs so many times before. It is indeed the healing of the nation. But, not to keep the eye too much longer on this particular subject, because I would love to get into this article so ones, of course, can start to, again, begin to work in those circles. As I mentioned, like Brother Iyah saw, as well as Brother Baruch as well. But here, from the article which we had brought up just some time ago, ones can search this out, of course, on the Wall Street Journal, the Miami Herald, LA Times, whatever mass media newspaper or news outlet one, of course, tend to check out or have a good recollection of or have seen from time to time here in this particular subject. It really has, taken helm in a few short span of years, and definitely up until this point, it has shown and proved to be one of the more hotter topics that is not so much in the forefront. We found it so interesting that this particular article, this particular subject was whispered in mass media. NBC, CNN, and all these other mass media outlets, these mass media networks, it was almost like a blimp on the radar. If ones were actually watching the news that day. I had been following this story from such a time, but we had sought to get this message out a little more expeditiously than we had. But of course, as we mentioned, John brought us to this particular podcast at this particular time, so let His will be done. And we of course have just followed up on certain things, bringing this to this particular time and the matter at hand, and seeing as so much of this has continued to come out, we come to this particular article here from the Strategic Tech Investor, a writer and very affluent businessman. Have to give credit where credit is due, and really leave this on the table for ones to research for themselves as well. We definitely have to look at this particular Western Gregorian year in a new light for us, especially leading up to January 7th, which of course is what we know in the Eastern Orthodox Wahedo Church has more so a definitive birth date or birth acknowledgement of, indeed, Jesus Christus, Yoshua Mashiach. Not so much as his birth, but more so the sighting, more like a christening in this sense, especially coming out of the chapters there in Luke. And even so, as we are mentioning here, Kanabosu. And the brother, of course, had mentioned this from Rastafari sabbatical. We can't help but think on another few verses from Luke, chapter 16 of the parable of the just steward from Yeshua HaMashiach. And in this sense, thinking and connecting that, of course, with the Kanabosu, we definitely have to, again, up our game, as they say, quote unquote, here in the world. But here from this article in the Strategic Tech Investor from Michael A. Robinson, this article coming from November 28, 2017, entitled, Coming January 1st, Legal Marijuana's Biggest Trigger Yet. Even after stacking up a bunch of double, triple, and even quadruple digit gains over the last year and a quarter, many of my roadmap to marijuana millions pot stocks still have plenty of gas left. In fact, a few of my Canadian legal marijuana plays in particular have been on fire for months now, and especially since November 10th. That's the day Canada's Department of Finance presented its cannabis tax plan. The Canadian government plans to add a $1 per gram excise tax on cannabis products, or 10% of it, whichever is higher. Plus, the tax plan reiterated Canada's commitment to legalize marijuana by July 2018. No wonder my readers from, quote-unquote, fast fortune Canadian pot stocks jumped higher. One of those stocks rose 15% the day the news broke. Another soared 10% that day. Another jumped 6.8%. Another picked up 13%. But today we're talking about the one that gained percent on November 10th. We're focusing on that one because it's gone on to soar 76%. Then thanks to another catalyst entirely, and it's gained an amazing 766% since I first alerted my readers to it back in September 2016. Today, I'll tell you about that stock and the second catalyst that boosted its gains. I've identified another trigger that's going to boost pot stocks on January 1st. I want to get in on these stocks. I want you to get in on these stocks before that catalyst hits and before mainstream investors catch on. Legal cannabis will grow 407.3%. Now, before we get to this Canadian company's huge surge, let's take a minute to remember why we're all here, why we've been jumping all over the legal cannabis market for more than a year now. Legal marijuana sales in North America in 2016 totaled $6.7 billion. By 2025, legal sales in North America are projected to reach $24.5 billion. That would be a 265.7% sales increase in just 9 years. Recreational and or medical marijuana has been approved in 29 states and the District of Columbia, or Washington, D.C., and in many countries around the world. And it's the reason why the global marijuana market topped $11 billion in 2016 and could reach $55.8 billion by 2025. That would be 407.3% growth. At the top-tier cannabis companies, the ones I tell my members about, will watch their sales skyrocket. More sales will create more demand for pot stock, and that demand will help send pot stock prices higher. In other words, the legal cannabis sector is no longer the Wild West style marketplace it was back in, say, 2013. Even if there is still plenty of volatility compared with a plastic broader market, that's why the right pot stocks reward forward-thinking investors with triple and quadruple digit gain. And that's just half of this article, which we have here from, I guess you can say, tech investor, a very educated and very forward-thinking writer and an analyst, so to speak, of many of the economic markets of the world, and just giving his readers, many of the ones who follow the strategic tech investor, and many of his NOVEX reports on many of the particular markets within the world, i.e. the stock markets, the exchange-traded funds, and pretty much what we had been following for such a time up until this particular report was that many of these marijuana dispensaries, especially out in the West in the state of California, had driven the market so much that now legalization has begun in droves in many states, more so within the recreational and medical marijuana subjects, but legalization nonetheless. Even speaking on this, we mentioned Sister Jan2018, Peter Tosh's eldest daughter, and the legal beneficiary and executor of his estate, has definitely been in many of these talks, and she has gone to many events and attended many events, not only within the Caribbean, but even so here on these shores. It once has, kept up with the sister from such a time, very formidable sister, very well spoken, and definitely been a prospective person to look into, especially with all of this that has been going on. Though we have our brethren, and he has, of course, spoken with us and reasoned with us and reasoned with all of you, those, of course, who tune into Rastafari Sabbatical, on many of these subject matters and how we see these things, especially spiritually speaking, on a sense. But again, I bring to note not only the works of our brethren who had presented certain things from such a time, in which I indeed, while other ones, of course, are looking to get into many of these matters and feel the word of that parable of the good and just steward from Luke chapter 16. We are definitely open to much more discussion and concept mapping of this particular subject matter, especially seeing the helms of January 1st, 2018 come to fruition at such a rapid pace. But what we found so interesting, just to say the least, that we couldn't let one go without seeing this. Here in the Wall Street Journal, and ones can research this just for themselves, a snippet here. The title by Richard Boxer, November 19, 2017, mentions, "Can marijuana alleviate the opioid crisis?" It reads as such: "The federal government should stop blocking research into the drug medical potential." This is the Wall Street Journal, again, I mentioned. Jennifer, a 37-year-old Virginia school teacher, now unable to work due to unrelenting pain caused by a generic spinal disease, stared hopelessly at the bottle of opioids her doctor had prescribed her. Beset by desperation, discomfort, she faced a difficult choice. The opioids would provide limited relief, but came with a high risk of addiction. Or she could try marijuana, which would likely be safer, but put her on the wrong side of the law. I leave that one for us to look up for themselves and, of course, expound on a bit more. Unfortunately, our brothers and sisters, I really would not love to leave behind with the cliffhanger as such, but we definitely had sent this notice out to ones who definitely check out our first day economic opportunities. with our pending newsletter to come. We even had to turn this specific one into a post, which will be, of course, reflected on Rastafari Renaissance and Rastafari Groundation.org as well, just to expound a bit more on that. And again, keeping in mind Luke chapter 16 of Be Good and Just Steward, because this is not essentially just a matter of, as they say, getting rich in this sense. We definitely hold a bit more of our personal truths within this, more of our spiritual life within this, and definitely, though we know Jah indeed is the avenger, we still hope and expect for him to give us the victory. So as always, our brothers and sisters, we give thanks for the eye tuning in here to the upper room of Zion. As always, keep Jah first in everything that you do, even leaning up into this quote-unquote Western Gentile New Year, and look forward to Gena, as we would say, Ethiopically speaking. Welcome, Gena, our brothers and sisters, leading up into this particular RSS number 13 and the start of our Rastafari sabbatical studies in the book of Exodus, Shemot, Orit, Zetfeat. As always, go in peace and love and serve Jah. Our brothers and sisters, we give thanks for each and every one of the eye. So much, so much, so much more to come. But indeed, this has been another edition of the Upper Room of Zion here on blogtalkradio.com from Discipleship Radio. I am indeed your Wyndham, your brethren, Lidj, Yefdi, Yefdeyah, Rastafari Renaissance.com. And always keep Jah first and seek the kingdom.
Bottom rail on top, massa. Nowadays the karma come back a lot faster. People you were ahead of them seem to shot past you. WrestleMania, high yourself, you done got tagged in. Bottom rail on top, massa. Nowadays the karma come back a lot faster. People you were ahead of them seem to shot past you. WrestleMania, high yourself, you done got tagged. Let me at him, don't let me Eve. Ain't we been here before? I feel a naked breeze. I just went to the store and bought extra leaves. Bloody murder, I need a couple accessories. Necessities, I bear them all. And hold court with the lions so we can share the ball. You relying on sipping lean and Adderall. I'm relying on daily bread that manna fall. Whew, I'm about to manifest destiny. Manifold, Emmanuel is the recipe. Many your days a number like sesame. Why you grouchy, big birds for a lesser fee? Incessantly, incest with a lesser me. Gave birth to a higher power to like the 10th degree. All my chakras is balanced, you feel the energy. Married to wisdom, proposed to on bended knee. Gave her the ring, we broke the glass and jumped the broom. I'm on a natural high, call it the honeymoon. Love heals, but trust will give you some ugly wounds. And hate to kill your emotions worse than the 22. Ricochet, I'm coming from every which way.